So now I've come to talk to you real quick about the situation in the whole unfortunate reality that is the Israel versus Hamas war, and the ongoing conflict, which never seems to end because um, effectively, one side, which is the clear kinetic winner, is never allowed to have its kinetic victory become an actual victory because outside political forces are constantly stepping up to allow the loser to pretend that they've won and thus to allow the conflict to linger. And it has a lot to do with the culture of the side of the loser. And of course, the ability that they've used to spread that culture and that that ideology to other people in other cultures. So, what do I mean? Well, Israel is obviously the clear kinetic winner in every war that it's ever had since 1948. There's no question about that. It has kinetically won every single um, conflict that it has endured since it was reestablished as a state in 1948. There's no question about that. Has it? Has it? Suffered um, a high number of casualties in certain of the war? Yeah, absolutely. During the 1948-1949 War of Independence, the Israeli population was about 600,000 people, and 6,000 of them died in war, many of whom were civilians, actually. So it suffered an entire percentage of the population was killed, right? But kinetically, the country still won the war. However, at the end of that war, the losers, for whatever reason, were not required to surrender or declare defeat or declare that their conflict was over. Right? They were allowed to effectively pause the conflict with a sort of a truce, ceasefire, an armistice agreement, right? Which is what they called it, an armistice agreement, which basically means a ceasefire, which is a temporary cessation in violence. Right? The losers, which were all the Arab nations that were aggressive towards Israel and invaded Israel in 1948, which include Egypt and Jordan, and Syria, and Lebanon, and forces from as far away as Iraq and Sudan. All those nations, attacked Israel unprovoked, just because they refused to accept the existence of a state for the Jews, by the Jews, about the Jews. Right? They refused to have the reestablishment of a Jewish homeland. Right? They didn't want 1 centimeter of it. And they told their people living on this land to leave, and that they would only be gone for a few days, and that during those few days, their ferocious Arab armies, who, by the way, were equipped and trained by the British Empire at the time, they told them that, and some of them were by the French, the Syrians specifically, and the Lebanese as well. So they had the British and French empires who had literally equipped and trained the Arab armies against the Israeli army, the nascent Israeli army that, was a very scrappy army at the time, that was clearly the kinetic underdog, and yet somehow managed to win that war. right, in an extremely decisive victory. There wasn't anything. There's no question about it. Right now, at the end of that war, again, because of the political ties between these Arab nations and the empires that controlled them, namely the British Empire and the French Empire, these Arab nations were allowed to sign an armistice agreement with Israel rather than a peace agreement. What happens normally at the end of a war is you have the belligerent sides declare a mutual end to the conflict and sign a peace agreement. That's what happens. One side declares victory, the other side surrenders, and there's peace. But we're dealing here again with a period of time in the middle of the 20th century, short after World War II. World War II was ended in that way, right? The Germans surrendered, and the Allies and Axis powers declared peace, and then, of course, the Japanese as well eventually surrendered unconditionally as well. And the Allies and Japan, which was also part of the Axis, but Japan is the last sort of domino to fall for the Axis powers. They also declared peace, right? And thus began the greatest era of peace and economic power building, economic nation building in history, right? And it led to the establishment of the United Nations. It led to the establishment of NATO. It led to the establishment, eventually, of even the European Union, and Japan being, at one point, the second strongest economy in the world, and Germany being the leading economy in Europe, and France being the second economy in Europe, and all these really great and amazing things with regards to geopolitics and economies, which literally helped the United States reach its zenith in terms of geopolitical power and economic power and civil power. It was seen as the leader of the free world, and it was seen as the emblem and the hope, the promised land for people, as the land of opportunity. For people who wanted to aspire to a better life, they sought to live in America. They sought the American way of life. They were looking forward to being more American, right? Even if they had to bring those ideals back to their own country because they couldn't actually live in America. So American Western values were exported from the United States. Where are those American Western values from originally? You could say a lot of them are, even though America was founded not on religion, religion did influence a lot of the American founding fathers of the Constitution, who were personally, a lot of them were men of faith. Some of them were not. Some of them were actually what you would call atheists today. But they had values that they were taught, which were from the Judeo-Christian, scriptures, if you want to call it that. So the Old Testament, right, the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, and the New Testament, the Christian New Testament, right? That's where they got a lot of their values from, of course, updated throughout the centuries to be more reflective of the times they lived in. And so that those kind of Western values were seen as, more progressive, more liberating, giving people more rights as human beings. Eventually, after America dropped slavery and, empowered minorities with civil rights and empowered women with civil rights or equal rights, relatively, because that took even longer. Until the 1980s, women could not own businesses in the United States without a man being signed on as one of the fiduciary roles. Did you know that? Right? But yeah, anyway, so America was seen as this leading country in the world, and Israel was very much not modeled after the United States in its early days, but became more and more very much a reflection of American values over the decades, and is today a country that has very American values in many ways when it comes to at least capitalism, business, and even a lot of politics, right? There's a polarization in Israel about politics that's very much like America, even though it is different in many other ways. there are a lot of similarities. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk more about this later because honestly, oh, hi, that cameraman, bro. I'm say hi. Okay, hi. Anyway, so the point is the war still on? Well, the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas just ended 2 days. And right now, the Arab world, or the Muslim world specifically, is in the period of the year that they call Ramadan, right, which is a holy month to religious people who are Muslims, and they are, it does happen. In fact, historically, statistically, we see that happens more than not. So hopefully this year will be different, but at the moment it looks like there will most likely be a resumption in violence in between the belligerent parties. Maybe even during Ramadan, I would not be surprised. And during Purim and or Passover, which are Jewish holidays that also happen around this time of year. And yeah, that's the forecast, unfortunately, for now. So anyway, I wish everybody peace and love. And see you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.